All right, hey guys, today I'm going to talk about why I do art shows every year, and also the tips and tricks that I use to make myself motivated to create art before them, just my regular daily practice. So let's get into it. All right, so the first thing you need to know about doing art shows is they are pretty profitable. They're a bit of a gamble though, so I will say this. To do a top 20 fine art show, meaning top 20 in the country, in my case, United States, you need to have good booth photos. You need to have 4 or 5 really solid photos of your work without a distracting background, neutral color background. Let me just say I have a background in having juried for the largest art show in the United States, so and actually one of the top rated, at one time the #1 top rated fine art show in the United States. And that's what we look for, clean photography of your work. So have a nice background, simple, not distracting. And of course, having unique work is super important. That work that requires high skill, that's original, interesting. So that's one part of it. Now the booth fee is expensive. So there's the gamble of the application, which is you put $50 toward an application, we review your work, and if we like your work, then we give you a green light, and then you get to pay for the show. And the show can be anywhere from a couple $100s to $1,000. For instance, the art show I'm doing in about 2.5 weeks from now, Ann Arbor Art Show, is about $725 for a 10x10 booth. I just recently decided I was doing this show. I was able to get on the wait list thanks to them. And so now what I'm doing here is preparing. Now I'm going to show you what I do to prepare for an art show. The first thing is I try and block out short amounts of time. And I've talked about this before in previous videos, but I wanted to show you a kind of physical example of what that looks like. So I'm going to show you a few carvings in that realm. So what I do is I set a timer for 30 minutes. I like to use the timer app on my iPad. I pull it up and then I have my reference photos next to that so that I can see as I'm going how much time I have left, right? So I was doing a profile of a lady here. I give myself about 30 minutes per project. 30 minutes to rough in the project. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm spending 30 minutes carving on a piece and then selling it. No, I'm spending an additional few hours depending on how much it needs to be resolved. But the initial 30 minutes keeps me on track, keeps me focused on what I'm doing, and it's an incredible accountability. I can't find a better way of keeping me on task than using a timer. So the timer is great. The volume of carvings I do is so much higher when I have that. So here's an example of one. This is actually, believe it or not, this is a 30-minute rough-in. This is the furthest I've probably gotten on any of them. So I'm gonna have to do some finishing work, of course, on this one, but I got pretty far on that. Here's some more rough-ins. This one's kind of neat. Got pretty far on that. Gonna have a bird hidden in the leaves. I've got this one, and I'll post pictures of these on Instagram eventually, I'm sure, in the hands of their customers. But there's a green man. This was not a half-hour carving. That was one that I buttoned up yesterday. And so just the last few days, I've been working on these projects. These are either 30-minute projects that have been worked on, or they're just the rough-in 30-minute bare bones project. So this is another one that I did. This is kind of a fun one. I don't know if the light's gonna come on that. It's actually pretty sizable, you can see next to my head. It's a fairly big piece, and it keeps going. So these are some of the ideas. My kind of rule is I tend to have a different reference photo for each carving. So I like to have a bank of photos that I use as references for each carving project. Again, I don't want to create the same thing. And sometimes when you time yourself and you get in a rhythm, I've noticed that I start to create similar forms. And so having a new reference photo kind of pulls me out of having that same form. Or I don't want to carve 8 carvings with the exact same eyes and nose and all that. So having that kind of new reference photo inspires a new shape. It makes things so much better when I'm looking at them after the fact. So here's another one that I just did today. Let's see if I can get the light on it. Yeah, there you go. Kind of neat. This one needs quite a bit of work, but super simple. Oh, well, now it's gonna need even more work. And then this one. All right, so This is birch. I love how birch looks. I mean, I love the wood color, the striations, the grain. It's just a lot of fun. By the way, that one's not a 30-minute carving as well. That was like a couple of work sessions. So then I've got a stack of wood carvings piled up from multiple days of work. And then what I'll do is I'll pick 2 of those up per day. 2 of those 30-minute rough-ins. I'll put them up on the wall and I'll try and finish 2 of those each day, right? And what that means is I'm really gonna tighten them up. I'm gonna make them, just more finished, detail, whatever the thing needs, whatever it needs, I'm gonna give it that. And so really taking my time on that at that stage. And then I'll go and I'll do another round of 30-minute carving. So I might do 2 or even 3 30-minute rough-ins. So this is a way for me to be inspired, to not get too stuck in the left brain part, because I know if you're anything like me, sometimes you get so stuck on creating projects that are original and interesting that you don't ever decide what to do. And then you end up spending 0 time carving. It's just all thinking or getting busy. You find something else to do. So part of the 30-minute practice is that it forces you, once that timer goes, to just decide. Like, it doesn't matter what I carve. It's going to be more important that I finish it and that I made something today and sat around on my computer or walked around the house eating snacks. So that's that. This is a bit long-winded, but yeah, I'm excited to do the show. I should tell you what it is. It's Ann Arbor Art Show, and so if you're in the greater Michigan area, come visit me there. I'll have lots of artwork. And by the way, I should say, not all of the carvings I bring to these shows are these 30-minute warm-up projects, the 2-day carvings. They're usually a mixture of these projects and then projects that have taken me weeks of, or days and days of time, right, up to a week or more even. So something like this is like a 3 or 4 day project. This is not warm-up carving. So I've got a lot of carvings like that. This is just a way for me to make things that are a little bit cheaper to sell, right? People can afford these as opposed to, $1,000 for something like this, $500-$600 for something like this, or thousands of dollars for some of the larger carvings. So I do a range of that, which I should probably mention. I'll show you this carving really quick while we're here. This is a large scale piece that I have done with my buddy Abby. We did a bunch of these cedar carvings. You can see this one's huge, right? So what I'll do is I'll rough these guys in, and then I'll have a separate day where I spend at least an entire day on each piece. So the goal is to really refine each piece and make them worth selling. A lot of times it takes me 2 or 3 days per large carving to get them where I need to get them. But it is important to have a piece that is larger, at least one piece that is larger than the others. Number one, to draw people into your booth. Because, from the street, people are just sort of looking and quickly scanning to see if anything interesting is happening at the fair. And if you have something that stands out, that will capture the person, that will bring them to your booth, and then they'll look at all of the smaller things that you have. It was that large thing that's selling your smaller things. So having that, it's an eye catcher. And every once in a while, someone will buy your larger piece. The last shows that I did, I sold probably 3 or 4 large-scale life-size pieces, or actually some of them are larger than life-size. And so that can make your show go from an okay show to an amazing show. So having the larger scale stuff, of course, having your middle size stuff as well, the really highly detailed, sub $1,000 carvings. And then also, again, having these smaller pieces that you can do a little bit more quickly, that you can afford to sell for a little bit less, maybe a couple $100 instead of $1,000. One thing I'm going to experiment on is the whittles. I'm going to bring a few of these little whittles to the show, maybe make a little collage wall, and just see if people are interested in these as well. This will be an even lower price point for folks. So all that to say, I work in 30-minute increments. I try to diversify the size of my projects. I then allow myself the necessary time to finish those projects without the 30-minute timer. And I try to I try to prepare in advance, but I almost always end up working hardest in the prior, like the month of the show. So the 3 weeks before the show, I'm hustling. I'm making a lot more inventory because I typically don't have a lot of these kind of smaller pieces like this sitting around, right? So I've got to create them. So if nothing else, fine art shows, I do them because they force me to produce work. There's no other setting in which I'm creating, 5, 6, 7 pieces a week, other than at, getting ready for an art show. So having a big deadline, say you're a luthier, like my father, you build guitars, having that guitar show at the end of the year or multiple guitar shows, it's going to force you to make product. You don't want to be embarrassed at the event with an empty booth. So you have that kind of hovering in your mind, the booth fee, the time it takes to set up, the embarrassment of not having enough inventory, and it puts you to work. So I highly suggest, if you're starting out as an artist even, to look into art shows, not just for the financial kind of aspect of it, not just to sell your artwork, the marketing, the fact that it forces you to turn out more work and be productive. And as an artist, it's sometimes difficult to find the motivation to be prolific. So definitely art shows consistently have been a huge part of my life. For those of you asking, a lot of people ask me, how many shows do you do a year? I don't necessarily have a set number. I usually do a minimum of 2, and I know that doesn't sound like very much, but I have over the years kind of narrowed down the top 2 or 3 art shows that I've done, and then I stick to those, right? Occasionally I'll do a 3rd or 4th show, but most of the time I'm just doing 2 or 3 shows a year. Again, the reason why is I don't want to waste my time setting up a booth, hanging out for the weekend when I'm only making maybe a couple $1,000s, right? I would better spend my time elsewhere. So it's a lot of work to set up for an art show. It's a lot of work to stand outside in the heat of summer and sell your work. It's very rewarding, but I try to minimize the amount of times I do that so that I really look forward to each time that I do so. So, yep. Anyway, it's a whole process. You need Zapplication. There's a lot more to it. I won't get into too much of the details of it. But again, you're going to apply to a fine art show, you're going to need to have at least 5 really solid pictures of your work. You're going to need to have good quality images of your booth space, your 10 by 10 tent. You can send to the art show provider or organizer through an app called Zapplication. So check out Zapplication, kind of go through the list of requirements for each of the shows that you're interested in your area. Ask other artists about what shows they do that are best. And anyway, yeah, these are ways in which you can find good art shows and get into them. It is important that you go to shows with a lot of foot traffic. For me, there were years that I just said yes to whatever fair. Somebody gave me a free booth, I would say yes, just because I felt, might as well take advantage of the opportunity. Now, very strict about what shows that I do. And I'm still making this mistake. Like for instance, last year I did an event where I sold very little. I was paid to be at the event, to be honest, but still was not worth the time. So these are things that you start to weigh heavily. What are the shows that are ranked? There's a few ranking systems. One of the highest esteemed is Sunshine Artists. And so if you Google top, I think it's top 100 Sunshine Artists art shows. They actually rank the art shows based on attendance, based on artist recommendations. Those are really helpful tools. There's another one, I think it's called, if you search Greg's Art Show Review, something along those lines, he'll come up as well in the, I believe that's central United States, but I could be wrong on that. But using the websites to determine which shows to apply to, it's critical. I can't tell you how many art shows I've been to where the attendance and the sales were just okay, right? Only a small fraction of the people that you come in contact with are going to be able to, number one, they're going to even want your work. Number two, will they be able to afford it? Do they want it enough to spend hundreds of dollars on your work? So you need a large percentage. Say you get 1% of the population, right? if only 1,000 people go to the show that you're at, I mean, 10 people is not great, right? That's not a great amount of sales. So you're gonna need to try and get an art show with 20, 30,000, 40,000 people walking through, foot traffic, right? That's how you're gonna end up making great sales and sell the 20, 30 pieces that you ideally would like to sell. Make sure that those big pieces have a high price point. I wanted to say that before we get off to the larger works that you have. You're going to need to mark up at a higher price point for sure, because people will pay. You know, there's always this internal thing. I still have it. I'm still working on it. I can't afford that, so why would I put that price tag on it? And then you realize that those larger pieces are not something that you might buy. You're not your ideal audience, right? In other words, people that are buying your work might actually be wealthier than you. They probably are going to have more, what am I trying to say? More income they can afford to spend on artwork than you. So don't put yourself in the category of the buyer, because then you'll start making only things that people like you can afford. So you're going to start making these little whittles. You're not your ideal audience. Remember that. You're trying to sell artwork to people who are, and I should say, maybe you are. Maybe you are trying to sell artwork to the audience of people who is as financially well off and as interested in art as you. If that's the case, you can deconstruct your own psychology and figure out, well, I might actually be willing to spend an extra couple $100 on a piece of artwork if it's good enough, if it's appealing enough. So then you start to niche down the types of work that you do. So there are options for those of you who do want to sell things that are smaller to the everyday person, right? But you know, my model, at least the way that I run my business, I'm not necessarily trying to make artwork for people like me. I'm trying to make artwork for people who are better off than me in most cases. Not always the case. I'm very flattered when young people buy my artwork. It does happen at art shows. People in their 20s, people in their 30s with young families buying artwork. It touches me to see that they value it. But the mistake you can make is undervalue your artwork because you don't think people are going to be willing to pay for it. So don't make that mistake, and have fun at the fine art shows out there. I'll keep you guys posted on the event as I get closer to it. But Ann Arbor Art Show is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully I'll see some of you all there.